All right. Well, welcome back to the Finding Something Real podcast, friend. This is your host, Janelle Wood. And I am so excited because today I have another new co-host joining me. And as you may know, if you're a frequent listener of this program or you watch this, we have different young women come on here and share their stories, their questions or objections about Christianity or faith or God or religion. And we just have a good conversation. And then we invite Christian guests on to address those questions from a Christian perspective. But the first episode, whenever we're introducing a new co-host or a new young woman, it's just her and I having a great conversation. And so today I'm really excited to introduce a friend of mine. Her name is Olivea. She's in her early 20s. She's made a decision for Jesus, but she still has questions. And so over the course of the last I would say a couple months, we've been getting to know each other more. And as I was talking with her and praying about who to invite on as a co-host, there were just a couple of things that she said to me privately that I thought, wait a second, girl, maybe you should come on here. We'll chat. And she had reached out saying that she wanted to share some of her story. And so while often we have people who are really unsure about faith and who are really questioning whether they can believe in anything related to God, this little journey with Olivea is going to be different because she already has made a decision for Jesus, but she also is going to be really raw and honest about the questions that she still has. So I'm really looking forward to this. I hope you are too. And Olivea, welcome to the Finding Something Real podcast.
Hello. It's really nice to be here. It's nice to talk to you again. I always enjoy talking to you.
For somebody who's meeting you for the first time, would you mind sharing a little bit about who you are now, like the things that you're into, where you work, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so one of my biggest passions right now, I love to cook. I just love the creativity of it. I love, putting things together and putting flavors together and just feeding people. And I just love also too, why I also love cooking is just seeing how happy it makes other people feel. That's what I really, really love about it. And then also too, just like cooking reminds me a lot of like my family and growing up, especially like with my mom and all of us cooking and gathering together at a table at the end of the day, a meal that she cooked, but then also a time where we can come together and just talk about anything. And that's probably why I really love cooking, and just the creative process of it is just putting things together and, feeding people. But then also at the same time, while you're feeding the stomachs, I also feel like you're kind of feeding the souls. And I also really love to sing. I just started maybe like a month ago. I just started singing at my church. So that's been really, really fun. It's really different this time because churches I've been to beforehand, they would do like the new age Christian songs or like the upbeat songs. But with this church, we've been doing hymns, which I really, at first I kind of was like, I'm not sure about this. But ever since we've been singing them, I really feel like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, I don't know, just the presence of God, because it's just kind of like the old timey feel, but then also too, each hymn is like coordinated to a verse in the Bible. And it just, I mean, not that there's anything wrong with like the new age stuff or, the current fun boppy songs, but I just really feel like these hymns have really like enhanced me with like singing and just loving the Lord. And I've always loved singing. And when I was younger, I thought I was a soprano, like really, really high. And it wasn't until college where I realized, wow, I'm an alto. I can go really, really like, I think like 2 octaves lower than what I thought I was originally. And then another thing that I really love doing, I just love being around my family and friends. Like, I just love like creating memories and just having fun and just being around them. And like I said, just creating memories. I feel like those are the top 3 things that I really enjoy doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So cooking, singing, and spending time with your loved ones. Yeah, very family oriented. Yes. Yeah. And when you say new age songs, you're not talking about new age, like spiritually new age. You're talking about like more contemporary music.
Yeah,
Is
like
that fair?
Hillsong and It's honestly kind of the only thing I
Yeah.
can think of right now, but I know that there's other ones, but
Yeah. Yeah.
uh-huh. Not that there's
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
wrong,
There's
but
some.
I feel like the hymns have just been more like tugging at the heart more. Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah. When I was a little girl, my mom used to take my brother and I to a
Mhm.
nursing home. And we used to go in there with the
Oh,
hymn
yeah.
book. And my mom had a guitar. And my mom will say she's not a very good musician, but she, I didn't. I didn't think anything poorly of her musician
Uh-huh.
skills. It was all we had. And we went in there and we would gather a bunch of the
Mhm.
residents together, and there was one named Donnie. I'll never forget her. And she would always want the same
Mhm.
song. I think it was the old Rugged
Oh,
Cross,
yes.
And
Uh-huh.
so, yeah. And so we would sing those songs. And then there was another lady there. Her name was Marianne. And she'd always want to sing the Lord's
Mhm.
Prayer. And she, I think, was a soprano, and she was in a wheelchair. She had
Mhm.
MS, but she was young. She was only in her 50s, I think. And she would just belt out this beautiful rendition of the Lord's Prayer.
So
And
cute.
yeah, there's something about, I hear what you're saying, because there is something special about those old songs that have been sung for generations and
Definitely.
withstood the test of time.
Well, and,
And
like, a lot of
yeah,
people think, like,
yeah,
"Oh, they're just these goofy little songs," but I feel like if you actually read the lyrics or if you read what was written, they actually have, like, a really deep meaning to it and such a beautiful connection, in my opinion. Mhm.
yeah, yeah. That's really
Mhm.
cool. Well, Olivia, let's dive in a little bit. Tell me about your family. Tell me about maybe your family of origin. A little bit more about who you are. I know you just recently took a StrengthsFinder
Oh,
test
yes.
that shared some of your
Uh-huh.
strengths. I'd love for you to share that with whoever's listening, because I think it's super relatable to share the things that you know, we're naturally gifted at. How has God naturally gifted you?
Aw, well, I feel like lately, well, not lately, but a gift that I really feel like God has given me is just being creative. I just love thinking. I feel like my brain is never not stopping. Like it's just always constantly going. And I always try to use that creative gift anywhere I can be, like whether the cooking or literally drawing, or just being creative and planning things. Um, so yeah, I don't know how to connect that.
Yeah. No, no,
um,
no, no. It's good.
um,
Yeah. Your family. Tell me about your
yeah,
family.
so I was raised as an only child. But later on, I found out I was really young, maybe like 6 or 8. I found out that I had a half sister, or yeah, half sister. Like I remember randomly finding this little notebook, or not notebook, sorry, this photo album of like this baby that I've never seen in my life with my mom, and I remember being like, "Mom, like who's this? Like who is this with you? Like that's not me." And I don't remember exactly how she told me, but I got introduced that I had a half sister, and I think my mom was about my age, 25, 26, where unfortunately, she was in this very abusive relationship, married to this guy, and they had a child together. And because he was abusive, my mom left him. And then also too, my mom just had a little bit of disabilities. This is also the early 90s too, so the government and all this is a lot different compared to now. And so because she had a little bit of disabilities and she didn't have a lot of money and didn't really have a stable home after she divorced her husband, um my mom lived in this like group home in Spokane with these ladies, and like I said, because she wasn't financially stable, unfortunately the government told her, A, we're either going to take her away from you, or B, you're going to have to give her up to someone in the family. And so living in Spokane, her ex-husband's sister took took my sister in and then raised her. And I'm honestly not really sure why my mom and her didn't connect or meet afterwards. I think my mom just gave her up and, just kind of lived life after that. And so that's how I found out that I had a sister. So I always say, yes, I was raised as an only child, but technically I have a sister.
So you found out about her when you were 6 or
Yeah, I was
8.
really young. Yeah. After me and my mom and dad are like, all right, well, just one child is enough. So, I mean, definitely, with my personality, I get it.
Yeah. Were you well, I'd love to know more about that, but were you close with your parents growing up?
Yes. I definitely feel with just being the three of us growing up, it definitely was, we definitely had a lot of hard times, but we definitely had a lot of love. There was definitely a lot of times where we would argue a lot. And there was literally times where my mom was yelling at me and I just walk out of the house and I would still hear her yell. But at the end of the day, we would still come together and love each other. And it, we always, we would always talk about everything and anything. And it definitely was, it was also kind of hard too, growing up too with my parents. Cause also, I think around that same time too, I know I was in first grade, but my mom became blind. And so that was definitely a struggle growing up. Cause I think becoming blind, she got really, really, really depressed. And so she just kind of let go of her life. And because of that, she just stayed home and didn't really do anything and just, sat around and didn't, was just depressed, and I think too, seeing that and being blind, I was kind of the caregiver sometimes. So that was definitely a struggle helping her out. And um like with her, she passed away about 3 years ago now, and the last, I want to say about the last 6 months was probably the hardest for me emotionally, because for her physically, my mom was a heavier person. She wasn't like, how much, she wasn't like 1,000 pounds, like that big, but her weight, because of depressed and, being at home all day and not having any movement, it just got the best of her. I really had to help her out, and we even had to help her go to the bathroom, and that definitely was a toll. But like I said earlier, even though even though we had hard times, we, at the end of the day, we always said I love you and all that. So yeah.
Mm. That's hard. So it sounds like from the time you were in first grade, so let's say maybe around 7 years old, to, you said 3 years ago, like when you were 21, 22
Yeah, I was
years old.
22 when she died.
Is that about right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So for 15 years, your mom was pretty sick. Is that fair?
Yeah,
Okay.
I actually, I think like a year ago, I was in this car accident and I had to, with insurance and everything, it was totaled. So I had to get it proofed and all that. And so my mom's name was on the car. And so they had to, I had to have proof that she passed away. And so I had to give them the gift certificate or the death certificate. And so when I gave that to the car insurance, that was actually the first time I looked at it. And it will tell you like reasons as to why you passed away. And the first one, which was the main reason, she had a heart attack. And then the third one was the heart attack and all that was caused from uncontrolled diabetes. But then in the middle one, it said, I think like congestive heart failure, which if you put the two together, yeah, that makes sense. But I did not know anything about that. And I knew she was in bad health, but I didn't know it was like that bad. And she never expressed to me about that, about her dealing with that. And that's the one thing that I really wish she would have like expressed to me. I'm not sure if she did with my father, but at least with me, I wish that she did express, how she was emotionally and health, wise feeling. And I just wish, that that was something her and I could have communicated. Cause yeah, as a teenager, you have like, oh, mom, I'm fine. You have your rebellious, sassy, but I feel like if I would have known that she was dealing with that, I feel like our relationship would have been a little bit better and a little bit more, not less sassy. So yeah, it was definitely really, really hard. And I mean, let alone having a mother that's blind, but having a mother that you see really depressed and having that decline her health, it's been really hard. Or it was really hard, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you're trying to take care of her because you're her
Mm-hmm.
daughter. So I want to ask a couple more questions on that. And I know this is a hard topic, so if I ask too much,
That's
just
okay.
let me know. But did you resent some of that? Did you feel like, why am I the one taking care of somebody who should be taking care of me?
Yes, I do remember kind of feeling like the roles reversed, and it didn't make sense to me because also too, like growing up, I was a little bit like, well, you gave up your first daughter, but then here's this second daughter and she has to take care of you. Like, why not, your other daughter, and there was definitely a little resentment, especially to like when I hear like my friends or other people talk about the things like going out and having fun with their friend or with their mother. And like, I never had that. I mean, my mom would come out for like our games and like like when I did sports or plays or, church, she definitely would come. But because she was blind, like my dad was always there because he had to drive and I couldn't drive at the time. And so like her and I never, other than being at home, her and I never really had that like one-on-one. And so sometimes I do feel resented about that because it's like memories that I could have had.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever express that to her? Like, Mom, I need you to get help because I want you to be here for me. Did you guys ever have a conversation like that?
No, I don't think it was honestly till like the day she died where I kind of said something to her. Cause I remember she always said, she always, just jokingly like, oh, whenever I die, I don't want to be in pain. I want it to go quick. I don't want to suffer. And so, I'm not sure. I think I did tell you about the story of my mom passing away, but, so like before she passed away, she was in the hospital a couple hours beforehand because her blood sugar was so low. And I remember just kind of telling her like, well, Mom, like, you said you don't want to suffer when you die, but like, look at you now, like you're suffering now. And I remember she kind of just like looked away and didn't really say anything. But before that, I never really expressed to her about like, hey, Mom, get healthy. Like, I want this and that. Like, I think I never expressed that to her because I just accepted how she was. And I just accepted, what we had in our relationship. Um, but I mean, so a lot of that too is kind of reflecting on like me, how I would want to be as a mom eventually. And so, I mean, I definitely love her a lot and I miss her a lot, but there's definitely been a lot of like rough patches. I mean, any relationship there will be, but with her and I, there is definitely a lot of heartache and a lot of, anger, but at the same time too, like I just felt like too there was no point of even wasting my breath because I knew nothing was going to change. And like I knew that not that she wouldn't do it for me, but because of her depression and her self-worth, I don't think she would have changed. Mm-hmm.
Mm. Well, that's heavy and hard stuff, Olivea.
I know. I actually haven't talked about this in a long time. So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Especially now that it's been 3 years. And after she's been gone too, just so many things like stuff that I wish I could have talked to her, and I can't anymore. And things that,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in 3 years, a lot of stuff has happened. So and growing up, from a young adult to now being almost 26, just a lot of things have happened. And so it's kind of like, dang, I wish I could have asked you these things. But yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about, well, I'd love to hear a little bit about your relationship with your dad, but tell me about your relationship with faith in the mix of all of that. Like, how were you introduced to Christianity? What did it look like for you growing up? And tell me a little bit about your relationship with your father.
Yeah. Okay. So I feel like I was definitely very, very grateful to be raised in a church. I have been going to church for as long as I can remember. We used to go all the time. I remember one time there was even a little like Christmas day, and I opened up my cute little American Girl dolls and brought them with me to church, and I remember that. And then I feel like it wasn't until high school where I really like started to like really feel God's presence. Um, and that was so unfortunately my family and I would like not like church hop, but we would, if one thing would happen, my parents wouldn't agree with what would be going on at the church, we would go to a different one. So we were there, I want to say from probably about fourth grade until about my sophomore year of high school. So I was there for a long time, I feel like. And so I was very involved there in the youth group and the church. The very earliest thing other than being on Sundays, I was involved in Awanas. That was like a Wednesday night after school thing, and it was really cute and games. And that was where, I met some of my friends, even friends that I'm friends with now, and just creating those memories. And I remember they had where you had to like memorize verses. And I mean, I don't remember them now. but, but and then after Awanas, I got involved with the youth group there. And I feel like that was where, the most hard part of my faith, other than the last couple of years, but that's really like wrestled that I really grew from, and a lot of heartache. So the first couple years when I was involved in a youth group, there was a pastor. I think personally he was probably the best youth pastor I've ever experienced. Like him and his wife were very opening. They had very open arms. They loved all of us, all of us females too. The youth pastor's wife loved all of us. She never had favorites, and it was just very opening, and they never felt like you were left out. Like they were just always very welcoming. And then I'm not really sure what the whole thing happened, but they eventually had to leave. I think it was something with someone's family. So they had to leave. And so, they got to fill in the hole. So then they had a new youth pastor. And that's where I feel like things kind of got downhill for me personally with like not my faith, but just church hurting. And like him and his wife were nice, but there was just very questionable things. Like they definitely had favoritism, and like everyone knew that. And going to a youth pastor that had very welcoming open arms to that, it just made you feel, well, like what's wrong with me? Why aren't I loved as much as the other person beforehand? And also too, it was kind of interesting how they set up some stuff. So there was this one thing that really hit me was when two things. So we went on a mission trip, and I really felt like I was really called to go. And it was a mission trip to Peru, to like kind of like an orphanage for girls. And so I really, really felt like I was called to go. And when I told them that, they told me I could not go. I was too immature in my faith. The youth pastor telling a 16-year-old, you are too immature in your faith. And I just, now that I look back at it when I'm older, I'm kind of like, well, of course, like I'm only 16, and I don't even really know who I am yet. And that really hurt. And it also was very interesting to me too, because some of my other friends that were involved, when they said they wanted to go, they could go. But with me, I really had to fight for it. And I remember too, kind of me, my mom and dad, and him and the pastor and the youth pastor and his wife, we went out to lunch, and we just, talked about how, not that wasn't fair, but kind of like, hey, like what's going on, like, Olivia would love to go, but you're not allowing her, but these other people you are, like what's going on. And then it was kind of funny, like a week later, they were like, oh yeah, you can go. So, I mean, I'm grateful for the trip and stuff, but it was just very interesting. And then another time too, they had this women's Bible study thing, so they encourage, women to come. And so I remember asking the youth pastor's wife, hey, is it okay if my mom can come? Because, kind of like I expressed earlier, my mom, depressed, not really getting out. So I thought that was an awesome thing for her to do. And so she went the first Sunday, and if I remember right, she really did enjoy it. And then, I kid you not, on Mother's Day, the pastor's or the youth pastor's wife calls my mom and basically tells her that she can't come anymore. I honestly cannot remember what she said the reasoning was, but I just remember my mom crying. And like, now that I look back at it, like, it's just like, you say that people are welcomed, but then when someone tries to, you don't want them to come anymore. And so there was just a lot of, I don't know, it was just very interesting, the vibe. And there was also too this other thing. I don't know if this is gonna be too long. uh, but they had this friendly like competition of a bake sale. And there was like three groups. So it was me and another girl, and then two other groups with four girls, and they were gonna have it as a friendly competition as a bake sale, and each of us were gonna take 3 weeks or 3 weekends to do this at church, and whoever sold the most, have a fun dinner, just to get us motivated. And so the two other teams were two girls that you could tell were their favorites. And so it was just really funny because then all of a sudden they had it where the two girls teams joined up and they did a spaghetti feed on the same day that me and my other friend were going to do our bake sale. So it just felt very like, I don't know, very,
exclusive.
and just kind of like we didn't care. And it was kind of like, well, what's the point of doing all this hard work? Well, and also too, I think about it too, at that time, because of my relationship with my mother, and she wasn't, we didn't have the relationship that I wish I had. So I think I was really craving that motherly, you know, parent influence. Yeah. And so it just was a lot of, heartache and a lot to go through, and just a lot of, I don't know, just a lot of heartache. And so I feel like now that I look back at that, as a little bit older, I realized too, like turning that into, it wasn't God, I could easily blame God for all of that. But, I realized those were humans, and, I don't really know what was going on in their brain during that time, but at least for me, I can take that and, still praise the Lord, and, not have that affect my relationship with Jesus. So I feel like that that part of my life really just made me cling on to God, and just made me, I don't know, I don't really have the answer other than like this salvation and just staying positive and all of that. But
yeah. Well, it sounds like you had experienced the real thing. You had experienced real grace and real joy and community with people who were living it. And so when you saw something that felt very counterfeit, you could recognize that that wasn't God. Is that fair to say? Like, you had experienced something that felt very different with the previous youth pastor. So it sounds like you knew what it could be, and you knew that that wasn't it. Is that fair?
And it kind of reminds me too, when people tell me, which I get, it's very valid, when they don't want to step into faith because of people in the church, and how people in the church are supposed to be holy, holy, but then they aren't. I always think back to those, like, I get it. Like, I've been hurt. People around me have been hurt. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff I could tell you about later. But
off the air.
And so, I mean, I get it, but also too, I think, like I said earlier, just made me realize, that wasn't God, so why would I blame God if I knew God wasn't in that? So.
But at the same time, I don't know that much about your dad, but it sounds like he was probably the provider of your family. Yeah. So maybe he was pretty busy doing that.
Yeah, I love him a lot. I'm definitely grateful for him. I honestly don't know where our little family would have been without him. There was times where he worked 3 jobs at one time. And I know too, like he talks to me now. He's like, I wish I didn't, because, that really affected you as an adult, as a kid. But I tell him, I'm like, well, like you had to provide, like what else was there for for us to do as a family. And also too, I think about it now, like at least we're close now instead of, not. Uh-huh.
So, do you think that you leaned into faith in God because you genuinely needed Him? You knew that there was a need in your life, even as a young person. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I personally feel like I've never thought of it that way, but I would think so. Yeah. Yeah. I'd agree with that.
We'll move on here just real in a second, but just for whoever's listening. So, do you remember a decision you made to follow Jesus and what that looked like for you, like an event or something where you were like, yeah, I'm choosing this. It's not just my parents' religion. It's not just what I've grown up with, but it's a conscious decision that I want to follow Christ.
Yes. So like I said, I grew up in the church, and my relationship with Jesus and the understanding, like in the youth group thing. But honestly, I feel like it wasn't until pretty recent where I really felt like this is my choice. Like I think too, when we grew up in a church, you kind of get in that motion or that robotic, or kind of like, oh, this feels safe, but you kind of got to choose. And I feel like it wasn't until when I broke up with my ex, that was where I really feel like I really chose to follow Jesus. And that was when I had this big awakening where he told me that he was atheist, and we got into it together, both saying, oh yeah, we both believe, we both have the same idea. And then one day he just rips off that band-aid, and I just was so confused because I thought this was the man that God, brought me and who I was going to eventually spend the rest of my life with. And I just was really wrestling with it. And I just really, I don't know, I couldn't accept the fact without this guy. And I just tried to put a band-aid on it and be like, oh yeah, I can live it. I can live this. I can have a guy, that I can not believe in Jesus. I can be okay with it. But it wasn't until, just being on my social media feed and just all this Jesus content and videos and music being popped up. And I just felt like, I don't know, I just really felt like God was trying to speak to me and just trying to tell me, like, you need to move on. You need to, he won't glorify the life that I have planned for you. And I felt like I just had to listen, because I mean, I could have chosen to not listen and still continue to be in that relationship, not being happy. And so I feel like ever since I have broken up with this gentleman, I just feel this presence of God just being more wrapped around me. And I feel like because I listened to him, I just feel this presence, and I feel like, okay, God, I chose to follow you. And because I chose to follow you, now I feel like I'm deciding to follow you with my life.
How long ago was that you guys broke up?
That was in June. So almost 6 months, I think 6 or 7 months now.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So would you kind of consider yourself kind of a newbie Christian? Like you're figuring this out as you go? Yes?
Yes and no. Because I feel like with my roots of being a Christian, and, like I said, like with youth group and having that, like, yes, but I feel like kind of like a new life or like a new chapter has been kind of happened to me. And I don't really I don't really recognize who I was before all that. I just feel it's just kind of like this new mindset, this new outlook in life, I feel. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So I asked you to fill out the survey when you told me, yeah, Janelle, I want to be on the podcast. And there's all these options for, are you somebody who ... And there's a long list, but you chose none of the ones that I
really?
Put here. No, but you chose your own, which I think is great. You said other, You doubt about God sometimes, even though I do have a relationship with him, which I think is really honest. And so I always ask people, on this survey that people fill out, to share briefly their story, to talk a little bit about questions or doubts that they have. And then you followed up with me with some specific questions that I think were great. So I'm just going to ask you about those. How does that sound? Okay. So the first one, I think, and I'm not going to go any particular order. And by the way, I know I mentioned this to you before we hit record, but if you want to add any at the end of this, or you have anything that you kind of want to dive into, here's your chance. I know I've explained this process a little bit with you and shared with you that this is for you. It's also for people listening who maybe will relate to your story, or who will relate to your questions or the topics that you bring up. So, we can talk about anything you want, but one of your questions, and I think it's part of the reason why I was like, Olivea, we should definitely record together. The first one was, I believe in Jesus, but how do I know I'm going to go to heaven? Would you share a little bit more about that question?
Yeah, I personally feel like that kind of ties into like the fear of God, when people are like a God-fearing person. Because I think sometimes too, I get into the motion of, am I doing this right? Or is this glorifying God? Or am I sinning? Just all these like crazy thoughts just get in my head. And I just sometimes, just have this fear of like, oh my gosh, like even though I'm doing this, doing it all right, like there could still be a chance that I couldn't go to heaven or couldn't be in heaven. And I don't know, sometimes I just have this doubt where I'm just like scared, like, I don't know how to explain it. Just, I guess just the confirmation, it just would be nice to know that I would be going to heaven and that I am doing the right thing. And it's just, does that make sense? I don't know if I'm even explaining it right.
Yeah, no, it's a fear that you're not doing enough.
I think so, yeah. Fair? I think you actually struck the bullet on that one. You answered my question on that. Yeah, and also too, I think growing up a lot, I was always so like, even now, like so concerned of pleasing people. So maybe that could be tied into, am I pleasing God? Am I doing this right? Because I definitely do not want to spend eternity in hell. This sounds really, really scary.
I'm going to ask you a question that might put you on the spot, and I apologize because I don't want to, like, it may or may not. It may be like, oh yeah, I got that. And it may be, wait a second, I don't know what's going to happen when I ask this question. So it's not meant to embarrass you or to like, put you up on a pedestal. Either way, I'm just curious. Something I read a long time ago is that, something along the lines of, we have to preach the gospel to ourselves daily. So I'm wondering what the gospel is, if you wouldn't mind sharing it for whoever's listening.
Like, I'm so sorry. Can you repeat?
But maybe for yourself.
Can you repeat the question again? I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Would you share the gospel, Olivea? Yeah.
Yes. Are you talking about, I'm so sorry, I don't know why. Are you talking about like...
No.
Someone...
I'm totally putting you on the spot. I'm putting you on the spot. I'm asking you to share the good news of Jesus, in part because it kind of goes with this question here, right? Yeah. And I've shared this with you personally before. I love something that the pastor Josh White from Portland, from Door of Hope, has said on this podcast, and also in multiple sermons that I've heard him give, and in his book, where he talks about, every other religion is a ladder that you have to climb, something you have to earn. Christianity is a cross that we die on, that Christ died on. So I'm just wondering, and if you're like, yeah, no, I don't have that with me right now, that's totally okay. But I'm just wondering if it's something that you do preach to yourself daily, or if it's something that's like right there, or if it's more like, oh yeah, I don't have it right there.
I feel like it'd be kind of in the middle. Like, if I had to tell and share the gospel to someone, I probably would tell them, how would I word it? I don't even know how I would open up to someone. Like, I would just say, all of us are lost and all of us are broken and we're all sinners and we all, none of us are perfect. But God made us because he loves us and he knows we aren't perfect. And he just wants us whether we're broken or not. And goodness. um he life is gonna suck sometimes, and sometimes life is awesome as well, but as long as you just keep on being like positive, and I don't really know how to answer that question. uh Oh, no,
I'm
no, you're
sorry.
good.
I'm sorry.
I'm also like, oh crap.
Uh,
Because like, yeah.
maybe when we have somebody on to talk about that question, right? How do I know I'm going to heaven? What we really are asking them about is what's the gospel and how do we remind ourselves of it every
Mhm.
day?
Well,
Um,
I've definitely, I don't know if this is going to answer your question or not, but I definitely think the two things that I have really been focusing on lately is just keeping in constant prayer or communication with God. Whether I'm feeling sad or awesome or happy or mad, like I've just been trying to keep that communication up with him. And then also too, another tool I've been doing is just reading my Bible. I think those are the two things that have really strengthened my relationship. Um,
yeah.
so yeah.
Yes.
Right now I'm
Yeah. That's
working.
amazing.
I've only been reading Psalms. I'm like, I didn't want to read the beginning. I don't know why. Let's just start in Psalms, and so that's the first book I've been reading. Uh-huh.
Oh, well, the Psalms are really good too. Well, I didn't mean to, I mean, I knew I might put you on the spot there, but I really wanted to kind of dive into that a
Mm.
little bit with you, just for future reference as we invite somebody on to address that. So another one is, let's see, how do I know that God is listening when it feels like he's not answering my prayers?
Yeah, I'm definitely still working on that. So kind of, at least for me personally, the main thing that I'm working on that is being single, and really really longing to be married and keeping up, generations, and just having love. And even though my mom and dad's relationship was a little rocky sometimes, like I said, at the end of the day, we always loved each other. And I really want to have that. I want to be the leader, or, be, you know, just have that with someone. And it's been really hard because, I mean, breaking up with my ex, but even before that, he was pretty much my first boyfriend. And just having that doubt and praying and praying and praying, and then not really having anything answered when the people around me and other people on social media and stuff are always having boyfriends, or in this relationship, or once they get out of one, they're in another one so fast. And it's like, Jesus, why are you answering them, and why did that come easy to them, but then for me, how come it isn't coming for me? Like, and sometimes it makes me feel like, not like they're more important, but like, how come they're more worthy of getting that when it's something that I really, really, really want to have? And that's been one thing that I've been kind of wrestling with, and also too, wrestling too with like being just a bigger woman and seeing that, and just not a lot, in my opinion, not a lot of men are really attracted to bigger women. So sometimes I just get wrapped up in my head of all of that, and just feeling lonely, and just like, God, like, I have been praying for this for as long as I can remember, and like being almost 26, and a lot of people around me are already married, or like my cousin is we're the same age, and she got married last year and having 2 kids already. And it's kind of like, well, I want that too. Like, but when is it going to be my time? And it just really makes me feel like I'm behind.
Yeah. How you mentioned feeling insecure about your size. Do you feel like your internal voice is kind to yourself, or do you feel like you've got a mean streak in the way that you treat yourself? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, how's your?
It's been a battle for sure. I think as I was younger, it was really rocky. Like, I think my self-worth was really, like, oh, you're not beautiful, like, you're big, like, no guy will like you, because I never had a boyfriend in high school. But a lot of my friends had boyfriends, and I never saw, like, guys look at me. But I think about it now, and I think it has to do with my confidence level. Um, and then, and as I got older and a little bit like figuring out who I was, and also too with my relationship with Jesus, I've kind of, like, oh, well, like, I am beautiful. But sometimes it's hard for me. Like, I do feel like I'm beautiful on the inside because, like, my personality and my, like, love for people around me and my cooking. But sometimes, like, my physical appearance, it's still, like, hard to accept. hmm but I definitely feel like it's not as harmful as it was when I was younger. Like, I definitely try to help myself feel beautiful, but sometimes there's definitely still those days where it's just the enemy and these negative words are still attacking at me.
I think that struggle is one that a lot of people can relate to. That internal, like, secret self, abusive language that we have sometimes for ourselves. And if you're okay with it, I'd love to have somebody on here to kind of talk about some of that and overcoming some of that. If that's a topic that you'd be willing to add to our list, because I feel like it's an important one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, it's just, it's always been a struggle. I mean, being plus size, because, first of all, the clothes and going to the stores, but then also too, just having that, social standard of what beautiful looks like. And, we don't, I mean, none of us really fit in all the boxes, but it'd be nice to at least check off a few of them for yourself. But sometimes it's hard to. I mean, I definitely understand, like, inner beauty is definitely more important than outer beauty, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's a complicated issue too, because we talked, you and I go for walks, and we're kind of going through this like health thing together a little bit, where we're talking about, that temple of the Holy Spirit and taking care of it, right? Which that's all healthy and good. We want to take care and steward what we have, but then it can turn ugly very quickly to be like, oh, I have to achieve something in order to be worthy, or in order to be loved, or in order to matter. That's not, of the Lord at all. So yeah, I'd love to dive into that topic a little bit with somebody. That would be good. Thank you for sharing that too, Olivea, because I feel like that's such a common struggle and such a real way to share that. And then this last question, I feel like I'd love for you to expand on it a little bit, but you asked, is it even worth it? Tell me about that.
Well, sometimes, like, this having a relationship with Jesus, like, sometimes I just start, like, is it even worth it? Because, you see in social media of all these people having a fun life, and doing drugs and, having fun and drinking every weekend. And not that I'm saying I don't disagree with that, because I mean, I do, like, drink once in a while, but, it just sometimes, looks like they're kind of having more fun, and more, and us being Christians, we have to have a healthy brain, a sober mind, and, you know, being positive. But sometimes, I'm like, is it even worth it? I don't know. It's just, sometimes I just have this doubts, like, is it even just worth my time? Because also too, like, I sometimes think too, I also have doubt, like, what if like God isn't even real? Like, what if I die and like God isn't even there? Like, what if it's just like poof and like I'm gone? And like, was all of this even like worth it? And like, just like, I don't know how to explain that.
Hmm.
But,
Yeah.
just, is me taking time to pray, does it even matter? Does it even matter that I'm reading my Bible? And all the stories that we got taught in the Bible, like, is that, is it even real? Like, you know, is that even like worth my time and my brain to consume if God isn't even real? So I think sometimes I just have that doubt, of like, is God even real? And if so, like, is it even worth it?
Hmm. How much of you, and again, not to put you on the spot, but that's might. Sorry, I have a knack for that.
That's
How much have you? How much have you looked into that question? Like, is God even real? How much have you like explored that for yourself? Of because I know for me personally, I'll just share. I've had those doubts personally, and what's helped me a lot is something that I know your pastor is into, apologetics. Right? It's like, okay, what are some things that I can know that will help anchor me when the feelings of change and things aren't going the way I want it to, when they change. What anchors me? And so I'm just wondering for yourself, those thoughts that you have sometimes of, is it even worth it? Or what if this is all a hoax? Like, what if this isn't even real? How have you dealt with those thoughts personally?
personally, I just honestly try to wipe them away and I try to ignore them. And I just, even though I'm feeling doubts, I just try to keep on praying and keep on reading. But a story that kind of like, that will always stick to me, um, that I really feel like God's real is, so a couple years ago, I don't really know exactly what had her go into the hospital, but my grandma went into the hospital, and while she was in there, I guess something happened and she had a heart attack. And so I think at that same time, I just happened to have the day off. And so my dad and my mom and all of them went to Wenatchee. And I think my mom already happened to have a doctor's appointment. And so we were just going to go visit her. And so, like I said, I don't really remember the whole snowball effect as to why she ended up there or whatever. But so with her having a heart attack there, I remember the doctor taking me and my aunt and my dad to the side out of her hospital room and basically telling us that she was going to die, that she had, 2 days left to live, basically. And I remember like sitting there and being like, oh my gosh, like crap. And so like we called everyone of the family, and like even her sister, who lives in Wisconsin, like flew down the next day to say goodbye. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, and just like it just was really emotional. And then I don't know why
It's all right.
so like we kept praying and praying and praying, and then so she had like a bypass. I think that's the surgery, because like of course they're gonna try, instead of just letting her just lay there and die. So they're still, we're still trying. And then like literally like the next week she like wakes up and like she was totally fine. I haven't talked about that in a while, but I think that's the only thing that I can really think of, like, that really like made me like, oh my gosh. Because like being there and literally hearing the doctor that she's gonna die. I didn't think I was gonna cry. But I think I mean, there's been other stuff in my life. But that's the big story of power of prayer that I really feel like, really like God listens, and like, so I think that story, in going through that experience, I kind of try to help myself remember that, where it's like, these doubts and these like, you know, he is real and he is listening. kind of going back to the question of, like, God, are you listening? Like, when is it my time? Like, he does listen, but it's like his time. It's not going to be my time, because if it was my time when stuff happens, it would be a crazy wreck. But on his time,
Yeah.
it'll work out, but just being all wrapped up in my head. But
Yeah. Well, Olivea.
I know. I didn't think I was gonna cry.
No, I think it's all right that you did. I really appreciate you sharing all of that. Before I ask you the final question here, is there anything else that we haven't touched on, or that maybe we touched on, but we didn't pause to kind of dissect it a little bit, that you would love to explore in this journey as we invite guests on to come and address some of these topics or these questions? Is there anything else that you're like, actually, I'd like to ask that? That's something that I've always wondered, or that's something that bothers me. If there's anything like that, now's your chance, because I'm writing it down for you. We're going to go reach out to some people for you. And yeah.
Honestly, none that I can really think of.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I've always enjoyed listening to different people's testimonies and how they've come to God. And I've always, liked to be there and encourage women as well, kind of like what you're doing. And, even though life sucks and life is confusing, like, there is an answer for it later on. But none, like, I don't really have any more questions right now that I can think of. But if I will, I'll definitely text them
That's
to
all
you.
right. That's right. Perfect. And if you're able to come back for some of these conversations, you can always be spontaneous and ask whatever you want. I just want to make sure we're reaching out to the right people for you. And yeah. So, final question. I always ask the same one at the end of the podcast. And that is, the Finding Something Real podcast is about a journey towards restoration, eternity, authenticity, and love. All things that as Christians, we believe are ultimately found in relationship with Jesus Christ. Restoration, eternity, authenticity, and love. Which of those 4 things stands out to you the most in your life right now, and why?
Can you repeat the 4 things again?
Yeah. Restoration, eternity, authenticity, and love.
Which of them stick out to me?
Mm-hmm. And why?
Probably authenticity and love. I feel like love is one thing that, is a big topic right now in the world. You hear the saying a lot, which I'm not bashing, I'm not saying I disagree with, but like, love is love. But like, what is love? Like, I can say a cow is a cow, but like, what is that? And to me, love is more than just, I don't know how to explain it. Just, I try to wrap myself up in my life with love, because, it's hard to love people, but you got to, and accept people, and, just get loving on people around you, and trying to be positive on people around you. And, does that make sense? I don't,
Yeah.
and then I would say authenticity. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Yeah, you are.
Just being a unique person in this crazy world now, because I honestly feel like being a Christian and saying that you're Christian is definitely being a minority now. And just being that authentic person and being a unique individual. And I definitely think that's what I'm trying to be, is just being this unique person and being bold for Christ. And yeah, I don't know how else to explain all that.
No, it's good. Olivea, real quick before we wrap up, why did you come on the podcast? Why did you want to be here?
Well, I just remember, so like, I saw you at Safeway, and I think that's when our like relationship kind of blossomed. You invited me to the breakfast for your podcast, and I don't know, I just felt, I think it was God, like, I just felt this desire to want to talk about Jesus, and being there for other girls who may have been in the same situation as me, or who has, relatable topics, and having them feel like they aren't alone, like someone else is dealing through that. And I just had this voice and this feeling like you need to go on there and just talk and be yourself and just talk about God and life. And you're definitely very welcoming and very opening. So I really felt like, just the two together, I don't know, I just felt called to talk to you and be on here and be a voice for struggling people out there.
Mm-hmm. And besides being a voice for other people, what do you personally want to get from this experience?
I also maybe like self-discovery or self-awareness. I don't know if that would be the right word. Just kind of help myself reflect on my relationship with Jesus as well.
Yeah. Well, Olivea, I'm really excited. I'm really grateful that I never told you this, but ever since I photographed you, but anyway, I'm friends with your aunt, obviously. And I traded with her some preschool for the kids for photography. And so I was doing pictures for her for a number of years. And I did family photos for her, including a lot of extended family. And that included you and your dad and you and your ex.
Oh, yeah.
And
those pictures.
Yeah. No, but I remember thinking, there's something about this girl. And so when I saw you at Safeway that day, and I invited you, I didn't think you were going to say yes, but I just thought, I'm going to invite her. And so I was so excited when you reached out and said, hey, this is something I really would be interested in. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful that you are sharing, because I do think that there's other people who can relate to the things that you've brought up. And I also think, and I pray that through this, journey of inviting people on and getting to hear their stories and hear how they've wrestled through similar things, not only are you going to be encouraged, but your faith is going to be strengthened, because there's really great things to uncover and mine through some of these questions that you have. And so thank you for allowing a light to be shown on these things, as much as it might be uncomfortable or might be vulnerable or might, go, oh, wait a second, what is the gospel? Whatever. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful for you. So I hope that that's very clear in the course of all of this. I'm excited to reach out to people for you, but I'm really thankful. So stay tuned until next time.